That's as bright as
What
it
are you
goes.
talking about, Juan?
Oh, we're just
Ben?
talking about relationships.
Ben.
No, we're talking about Ben. We're talking about relationships.
That works well.
And how when we changed, and Ben started getting involved more so, it became just a change of relationship that Ben and I hadn't established. And that relates back to being a teacher, a police officer, a nurse, you know, because we had experienced that. I think we all have. If you have a good support base at the hospital, good nurse, you get good backup, you know, because the cariño's there, you know. Yeah, so. Hello, everybody. I'm Juan Martinez, and we're here with the folks that worked diligently on the Measure Z. Margaret, Rebecchi, and Dan Nilsson, Bob Kraut, Larry, and of course we got our famous Wes White in the background. Helping put this documentary so that it doesn't slip away from our past, our history. We would like to focus this brief discussion on the Measure Z event, Measure J of course, because one lapped into the other. This took place in May, June, through August, up to November of 2016. It involved actually 3 counties, and we commingled 2 different goals from 2 different campaigns that were taking place simultaneously, and they worked together. In politics, they might call that coattailing off each other. So it worked out great because we were all working with the same progressive people. We're here at Bob Kraut's house in Gonzales, California. So with that, I want to introduce Larry Rebecchi in particular, because he's going to give us a quick, hopefully a real thorough discussion on Measures J that had to do with anti-fracking measure in San Benito counties. Larry, leave it to you. You're on.
Okay, actually it goes back to 2013. Margaret in San Benito County, she had called all the supervisors, 5 of them, in San Benito County, and she was going to give a presentation at the board meeting asking the board members to sign a resolution in regards to immigration policies and support to reform immigration at a national level. And so we went to a meeting, the Board of Supervisors, and we ended up becoming aware of an issue in San Benito County where they were going to start fracking in the Aromas area and also possibly south of the Pinnacles, which had just become a national park. So that caught our attention, and it went from the resolution on immigration, it went into anti-fracking and fighting against the development of an oil field very close to our national park, Pinnacles. So this was June of 2013. So we, amongst the activists in San Benito County, formed a group, and we actually went out and got signatures to put an initiative on the ballot in November of 2014, and it was a very, very successful, and we were able to pass a measure, and we stopped the oil field from developing in San Benito County. And so then it evolved into Monterey County in 2016, and that's where Juan and Margaret actually was a proponent of J. She was one of the initial signers of the initiative in San Benito County, and with the knowledge that Margaret and very close friends, Mary and Andy Hsia-Coron, they were the engines, the driving engines on J. They got interested in doing a similar initiative here in Monterey County, which eventually was Measure Z. And so it was really centered around San Ardo, the oil field, very close to the county line with San Luis Obispo. And that in itself was very successful, and it passed overwhelmingly here. And it actually There were three parts of it. They were going to ban fracking, and they were also going to phase out, no new oil wells would be drilled, and the existing wells in San Ardo would be basically grandfathered in. And the third measure was they were going to ban wastewater injection, which is actually contaminating the underground water aquifers. So it passed, and then it went to the courts. Of course, the fossil fuel industry took it to the courts, and the only part that was upheld in the courts was the fracking. But here, well, how many years later? 6 years later, now it's reached the Supreme Court of California. They're going to hear it, I think, this summer. And very few cases get to the Supreme Court. So we feel very confident that all three measures, parts of Z, will be upheld.
They chose to take it.
They chose to take it, and we feel confident that they will uphold the other two parts of Measure Z. The only thing they upheld, the voters voted, was to ban fracking, and the lower courts said, yes, you can do that. But we feel confident that the state Supreme Court is going to uphold the other two portions of Measure Z. But I think this is where Margaret worked very hard, along with many, many members here in the coalition in the county. Juan worked on it, and Daniel worked on it. But Daniel came with a different idea and energy, and I think Daniel can speak to that. The energy.
Happy to.
Yeah.
First, I want to just mention that one of the main reasons we're meeting tonight is just to talk about our friendship, the four of us together, and the incredible bonds that we formed back in 2016 working together on these important issues. My life was changed. Juan, I just love you like a brother, man. I really do. Always have. Since the first time I saw you.
Yeah.
Really, both of the two of you, I saw you both come into the church on the same day. This was the church in Aptos, the Catholic church, yeah. Where we were doing, we were doing advocacy around community choice energy, which is a still relatively new concept that permits communities to take control of their own energy production and the portfolio of renewable energy as compared to fossil fuels. California is among, I think, 7 states in the country that allow communities to form nonprofit organizations, government-controlled, and to take the control away from the monopoly utilities, like Pacific Gas and Electric is the utility in this region. And they had an energy mix that was not at all progressive at the time. And so the thought was, well, let's form our own community choice energy program and determine our own renewable energy portfolio. But what got me into contact with these guys was that, you know, Santa Cruz was going to do this program on its own, even though it was conceived of as a tri-county effort. So San Benito counties, Monterey counties were going to be basically left out of the launch of this incredibly exciting project. And so at the Romero Institute, where I was working at the time, working with my parents, who my dad's an attorney, my mom is a nonprofit CEO, and they've got a history of really exciting legal work going back to the 1970s. You know, we were thinking, well, we have the Romero Institute, we have an alliance with the Catholic diocese in the Monterey region. What if we were to work with the church, form a coalition with other groups like these guys here, to figure out how to bring communities into this program that otherwise would be left out? And for us, that was mainly Latinx communities in the Salinas Valley. So here I am, in my late 30s, having lived in Santa Cruz for about 15 years. I'd never gone over the hill. I'd never gone into these other regions and figured out, you know, what people's lives were like in these other areas. You know, here's the birthplace, or at least the place where Cesar Chavez made his imprint, where he did his work. His life's work was done right here over the hill, next to where I was living. And I didn't even really have a developed conception of what had happened there. All that history, that rich history, and the rich present as well, of farm workers and, you know, these Latinx leaders. So what happened was, I'll just very briefly just describe it. We were giving a presentation at the church in Aptos, and there's a big audience there, and we're talking about this program, and I can see Juan, and I can see Margaret comes in the back, and Juan is sitting in the audience, and I just see a certain kind of light in you guys' faces, sort of. And I was sitting here thinking, I got to get this program to happen, but how am I going to do it? So I need partners. I need people who know these communities that I'm going to be going into. I don't know anybody there, right? And I just, maybe it's some kind of spiritual connection, who knows? But the point is, I felt this resonance. And it was not long after that we formed a bond, decided to work together. The Romero Institute went ahead and hired you, Juan, so that you could come on staff full time. And it just so turned out Juan knew everybody in the Salinas Valley, just knew all of the electeds. They all knew him by heart. Here's a gentleman who has worked with the Clintons to do voter outreach among Latinx people in the state of California. I mean, my luck could not have been better to connect with him at that moment when I needed that partnership as much as I did. But literally, I spent every day coming over the hill from Santa Cruz, driving into Salinas and the Valley, and we just knocked out all these communities. We met with the mayors, met with the city councils, met with local activists, and started to basically, it wasn't that hard. All you had to do was present them with the concept of, well, don't you want to control your own energy supply? Don't you want to decide whether or not you get wind power, solar power versus gas and coal, etc.? It was not that difficult to convince these different communities that it made sense to join. And of course, the financial side of it was beneficial too, because these communities get to hang on to the profits that otherwise would be going to PG&E. And it can lead to community development and things of that nature. So we actually had a kind of a downhill slide, so to speak, in terms of bringing all these communities in, but it was still incredibly rich, very rigorous, and I just feel like my entire life was enhanced. Like, I can't tell you how much more perspective I have on the Central Coast and just inland in California. This whole region here has become a place where I don't know, I saw amazing organizing during that period of time. And now this is where Margaret comes in. Margaret and her family, Margaret and Larry and their son Tomas, were spearheading the Measure Z campaign, right? So here I am, an organizer, thinking I got to get community choice passed. Juan and I are working together. Juan knows Margaret and Larry and a whole bunch of other amazing activists, mainly retired teachers. Sometimes I think to myself, I don't know how we get anything done without retired teachers. That was one of the lessons I learned from this experience. These very dynamic, intelligent, focused, hardworking volunteers. But they were doing Measure Z to stop fracking in Monterey County, and I'm over here doing community choice, and Juan is kind of like back and forth in between these two campaigns. And so what we decided to do is just merge. We just kind of merged together. And so we got behind Measure C, so we brought the institutional capacity of the Romero Institute and the Catholic Church, to the extent that we were partnered with them, behind the Measure Z organizing, and all the Measure Z supporters got in behind community choice. And so we had these amazing experiences. The one I'll never forget, of course, is the vote, where the supervisors had to vote on whether to bring Monterey County into the Community Choice Energy Program. It was like right down to the wire. We had, at the end of the day, it was a combination of grassroots pressure and kind of backroom, high-level organizing on the part of a woman by the name of Jeannie Johnson to get, what was the name of the supervisor, the Republican? What was his name? Phillips?
Yeah, Phillips.
Phillips came across the line to vote on behalf of community choice, and I'll never forget the look on Simone Salinas' face. He like jumped. When Phillips voted yay, he was like he had a physical response, because he had absolutely no idea that was going to happen. It was going to be a 3-2 vote against the program, but because of all these different factors, Phillips came across and voted yes. And so we ended up with the largest community choice energy program in the state of California at that time. Tri-County, the first Tri-County launch in history. And so all of these people, got to benefit from being part of a nonprofit, government-run, idealistic vision for how power is able to be, produced, procured, and then distributed. And of course, all these lights, everything here is all carbon-free. And it has been ever since 2016 because of the work we did together. All the electricity used throughout the entire Central Coast area is all completely carbon-free. because of the launch of that program. I just ran into Maria Orozco, is that her last name?
Yeah, Maria Orozco.
Yes, so she was on the policy board for NBCP. So
She was also one of the mayors that came on a commercial against us.
well, against Measure Z.
Yeah,
At that
Mr.
time,
Z,
right?
yeah, sorry, fracking, the fracking, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's as much as I'll say to start. I wanted to come down and pay homage to these experiences and to you personally, Juan, for all the things you taught me and the things that you brought into my life.
How I started with Juan is that I have a brother who worked for CET, and he knew King City all the way to Salinas. So I remember we did Measure J and we're going to do Measure Z. I called my brother and I said, hey, who should I call? Who do you know that could help me organize Measure Z? Because I'm in charge of King City all the way to Salinas to getting our Latino vote out. And he goes, there's a guy named Juan Martinez. And he gave me his number.
Yeah.
We talked for an hour, huh, Juan? I wanted to know how, I didn't know the people here, but I thought if I could find a leader, someone that knew the leaders, the politicians, the most important activists here involved, I said, as long as I could be introduced, who I was, what we were doing, Juan introduced me to a lot of them here. So once I met them, I had to encourage them and influence them about Measure Z. So I was in charge of getting the Latino vote. And how did we get the Latino vote out? Well, we worked with Monterey Community Power with
The Romero Institute.
Romero Institute, so we could go to the church because that's where our Latinos are at church. So we came out with a flyer with the Pope talking about the encyclical of
Laudato Si. Laudato Si.
and kind of put it together that we got to be stewards of the earth. And who does this affect the most? You know, the oil companies, the aquifers, you know, with their cyclic stimulus. It's our Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
They're dealing with pesticides. They're dealing with, you know, if the water gets contaminated, the aquifers, whatever. And plus we didn't want we wanted to ban fracking if they ever wanted to frack here in Monterey County. So we did presentations and we educated our Latinos. We knocked on doors, got the people organized to meet at homes, talk about the program, talk also about, you know, the church. And we talked at the church too, giving presentations about, you know, why we should support Measure Z. I mean, we couldn't say vote yes on Measure Z. We kind of did, but outside the church, you know. But explaining to them, and we put a little Pope picture, we put a little card, and we put the Pope would vote yes on Z because, you know, we want clean water, protect the environment, and being stewards of the earth. And then we also related to clean energy and climate change. So our Latinos didn't know anything about climate change, you know, they didn't know about all this fracking or going on. We had to educate the people why we had to go into green energy and why we should get solar. They didn't even know what solar energy was. You were starting to get people putting solar energy on their roofs and so forth, and programs that were available. But we explained to them about why we should transition into, you know, clean energy and solar energy and how they should put it there. But we also talked about we need to fight the oil companies too, because our Latinos are the ones who get exposed to the pesticides, to the chemicals, contaminated water, like in Kern County. After I went to Kern County, you had the school, 80% have inhalers. You had fracking next to their schools. Children couldn't go out and play out in the playground because it was just too contaminated, the air.
And asthma.
The asthma and also the cancer. So that really got me into when I actually saw that in Kern County and how people were exposed. A lot of them were exposed to these chemicals, and so many of them were diagnosed with cancer. And so I thought, well, since we're working against the oil companies, what would be a better way to change into clean energy? So that's how I joined Monterey Bay Community Power. Juan was also, we worked together, so kind of all of us worked together. And Measure Z passed, and Latinos did get out there and vote. And that's how we got our Latinos to vote in J too, because I spoke at the church why we need clean energy, why we need it to transition to.
The thing with Jay, we worked with Sam Farr, our congressman, and he was very instrumental in transitioning or making the Pinnacles a national park. Prior to that, it had been a national monument, and he took a lot of pride in that. And he supported us. He usually didn't support local measures, but being the fact that he was very instrumental in making the Pinnacles a national park, he supported us in Jay, and that was a big plus. And we stopped it, and thank God. The Pinnacles has become a very, very popular park, especially during this time of COVID. You get a lot of people coming from the Bay Area. It's the closest national park. So much so that it's very crowded now. It's kind of hard on a weekend, especially this President's Weekend. A couple of weekends ago, people were parking on the highway and walking in. It's just overcrowded. And, you know, just imagine if they had an oil field there, how terrible that would be, an oil field next to a national park. So I think we did a lot of good things for this area. And like I said, Z now is going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that's good to hear that.
Well, tell them, Juan, what we actually did with the communities and what we were doing.
Well, you know, I guess use your guys' discussion as a template, I guess. I got involved because I got invited to go to that church in Aptos. Showed up there, and Dan was up on the stage. He was a skinny guy, you know, well-groomed, short hair, you know. And I go, you know, good old liberal guy, you know, but Santa Cruz. But I liked the theme of what was going to take place. Possibility of creating our own local controlled apparatus where we buy and distribute the energy. So it sounded pretty good to me, and if we get the profit, well, why not? You know, I understood that maybe through Margaret or through her brother about how it affects Latinos, you know. And then talking to Dan, and Dan got like he said, got a little spark about us, and decides I got to talk to these guys, and I felt the same way, and I felt really good to be able to get the responses they got, just the feeling alone, because we were all kind of like not knowing what the heck was going on anyway, but we knew time was short, elections were coming up, and let's get as many city councils, board of supervisors, any electoral government entities that would partake in this partnership, which is an association of these cities and counties in 3 different geographic areas: Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito. And so Dan says, hey, let's get together and talk, Juan. So I said, okay, great, yeah, let's do this. Meanwhile, I've already kind of been hanging with these guys on Measure Z in Monterey County. I already knew they didn't trust me, and didn't appreciate me hanging out with individuals that were trying to hire me, because they're good friends of mine, trying to hire me for like $7,000 to $8,000 a month.
Oh, the opposition.
To work on the other side.
The opposition.
Yeah. So I went to a couple of meetings there.
But I convinced
In North Monterey County, and yeah, we went and checked it out, and Mary Higgins, another good supporter that really was a part of the backbone of the support, community support. Her and I went and checked out that meeting. We said, we just walked out of the lion's den over there. We just got out of there, like we wanted to wash ourselves down with something, yeah, and then let's do a little cleansing.
But I think Juan was the one who educated or introduced all the politicians to Daniel.
Oh, well,
And
that's what
not
we
only
do,
did
yeah.
you have to educate the community, you have to also educate the politicians, and that's where you guys came in.
Okay, yeah, but the tricky part is that I'm impressed with, really. So I like to mention it, is that these guys are trying to hire me. The oil guys are trying to hire me. And Dan is talking about hiring me. So I said, okay. And if I'm supposed to be doing this, first of all, the guys with the big money is the bigger the money, the bigger the target. It makes an easy hit. So, and then Dan's presentation and the opportunity that arose was that if I was allowed to flex my time, so I could commingle it freely from the Romero Institute and or the effort for Measure Z. Because if I'm going to talk to Joe voter, activist, community organizer from these areas, it's probably going to be the same people I'm going to come back and talk to for one campaign or the other. So I knew I had to talk to the same people. I convinced my bosses and hopefully created some trust with the Measure Z folks enough so that I told them the side effects would be obvious. Measure Z benefits 100% because somebody else is paying for me to supply energy, thrust in the community, newspaper articles, elected officials, whatever we brought on with Monterey Bay Community Power, totally pushed and pulled on Measure Z, the voters and the whole base that we were after. So we were after that base, which was all of those 3 counties and all of our population within, and the city councils. So there was an objective of, we knew there's 21 city councils, and the goal was at one time somewhere between 11 to 13, possibly up to 15. But the numbers were being played left and right depending on what kind of calls they were getting back from these elected officials that we started calling out. And I was totally surprised. Nobody had at those city council, well, I shouldn't say nobody, other than staff, but the city electeds were not up to snuff on the information they needed to have in order to make those votes. So their staff didn't persuade, didn't influence, and maybe it was their fault that things fell apart from that perspective, but I sensed it that the electeds were open, some of them were open more than they should have been to listen to us. They didn't come in close-minded, which allowed us to then talk to, hey, we're talking to people that worked with PG&E. They were retired staff with PG&E after 30 years, and we're trying to get them to go to solar and wind and, anti-petroleros, right? So one of them's now here in Gonzales, so they're one of the electeds. But that was our thing, and all over, like, we saw them in San Juan Bautista, Hollister, Pacific Grove, there's another guy in Monterey. Of course, South County had 2 people that on councils that were related to the companies, because a lot of ag pumps, electricity, and a tremendous amount of energy being used. We have all these roofing surface that could be applied to offset the cost of all these buildings. So it wasn't hard to sell, and especially the bottom line is money. Who's going to make the money? Who's going to save money? We were totally surprised.
King City didn't pass.
Yeah, King City and
Delray
Oaks, yeah. Delray Oaks eventually came on. But we garnered a lot of support. Dolores Huerta jumped into the fray and made her mark, and she motivated a lot of Latinos. Dennis Banks showed up. We went to the Salinas River with Dennis Banks, from the American Indian movement. We got some great video and interview with him. Strongly supported anti-fracking. And when the other cities start to realize the potential of pulling together all these cities, and we started getting on a roll, we were actually able then to pull in, I believe it's 19 out of 21.
It was a lot.
Yeah, 19 out of 21 cities, all, I would say mostly conservative, because you're talking city, Salinas, Gonzales, King City, all our effort, there's 21, and we did this 19, and became instantly the largest in the nation. And immediately, well, I should say immediately, took a couple of years, but now it's grown past Santa Barbara. Can you bring us up on that?
Includes San Luis Obispo. I think Santa Barbara has joined as well. Yeah, it's a very successful program. Yeah.
Awesome.
But it took a lot of work. I mean, you 24/7. It seemed like we would be commuting, coming here
So
to
much.
church
So
every
much
day. It was a lot of work talking to the people, the community, the politicians, having the people call their politicians and telling them that they wanted this project, and then also because they knew about Measure Z. We talked about the environment contaminating the water, and so people knew about it and they wanted to support it, but it did take a lot of work talking to them. Especially Juan loved talking to the people.
He does?
He loves talking.
We had a good time. We actually created a documentary on our efforts, the door-to-door stuff we did with elders, and then recorded the churches. That Deacon Warren Deacon?
Warren Hoy,
full support. The Bishop.
Bishop Garcia, Chuck Banner.
Chuck Banner created a great documentary on it, a great infomercial type, and but all in all, we left when we pulled back on the state of California and the nation, you see that as for a progressive movement of sort, like what we did, that was possibly one of very, very few in the nation where the activists, progressives, can stand up and say we did something, and that, as we all know, was the same year that Trump got elected.
Yeah,
So everybody in the nation was
Yeah.
really like, what? All the local people and all that.
Yeah.
Margaret and I were working on down in King City. We took a break, and Tomas calls and says, "Hey, do you want somebody to go do an infomercial? Do you want to? I don't want to do it." Remember, he passed the phone to me. Golden opportunity.
And to Washington.
So she slipped it over to me, and they talked about it. I talked to the director. The director started talking to me, and we I guess impressed ourselves. But they wanted somebody that's going to help pull together for a conference that took place in July of 2017, about the 17th of July, if I remember correctly.
In
10th.
Washington.
And they invited me to go do this infomercial. That infomercial went out through the internet and all over the place to all the progressives nationwide, on the political scene, on the environmental scene, on health, all that. So they got aware of this conference that was being put together by Bernie Sanders and folks like that. And I told Dan, "Hey Dan, guess what? I got this phone call. Over here in Chicago and this and that." No.
Chicago.
It ended up it led to Chicago.
Yeah,
So I ended up going to DC, did the interview. That got all over the place. I was asked to be on a panel like we're doing here in Chicago. And I said, "Yeah, they're going to pay for everything. All right, let's go." I haven't been there for a while. So I tell these guys, I tell Dan, and hey, we're going, and say, "Oh, okay, great. How did all this happen? What do you mean?" "Well, Margaret, just the story you all heard right now." And Dan says, "Hey, my effort was, what do you call it? Pat yourself in the back of all the good work you did, especially with the Romero Institute and the organization." So right away, these guys finagled a way to get over there as well. So they ended up on the same panel. Chase Iron Ice for in Standing Rock. From Standing Rock, he with the pipeline struggle there. And Dan showed up, and right away they knew a lot of all the national press guys, and they knew who they were talking to me. They're all new, you know. But Dan and these guys, man, targeting all the national press, and their mission was to get the word out on their stuff. They did a great job, but there was about 5,000 people there. It's now on YouTube. You could go see that all together. And but the Romero Institute was instrumental in the leadership and the backbone of this whole thing, because it wouldn't have happened without them. Those who initiated it stated that themselves. Those who worked it know that. Those who stood on the sidelines and went against us realized, like we have elected officials that were mayors that I helped elect, and they did commercials against us, you know. So all of them are gone now. You know, they're no longer there. You know, the situations happen. You know, but they're no longer there. And, so
it was historical because we started with Jay. Nobody thought it was
Possible.
possible. What is that? Lion and
I don't know what line, but
no.
we were outspent in Jay,
Yeah, you were.
maybe 20 to 1. We did bake sales and tamale sales. And one story Margaret could tell you about what happened. You want to talk when we made $10,000?
Well, of course, they always would try to always make up lies about me because I was registering a lot of people and talking, and I was the one who did the fundraiser, and I was going to do a fundraiser at my home. And we made all these enchiladas, and then the oil company sent the health department over. And said,
San Benito County Health Department.
did you get permission?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
no, I
yeah,
didn't. And he says,
yeah.
well, I'm kind of supporting you guys, but I have to tell you, if you do have this fundraiser, they're going to make it a big scene. They're going to put it in the newspaper. And they were trying to always intimidate me or saying that I was, you know, being aggressive, getting the people at the flea market, whatever, and doing these fundraisers. So I had to look for a place, that we went to Indian Canyon.
There's a reserve, it's like a reservation, and in Indian Territory, San Benito County had no authority. It was an area where we could do our thing and with no interference from San Benito County authorities. So we had a lady, Anne-Marie Sayers, who volunteered to let us use her facility in Indian Canyon, and we went out there and we had a celebration, and it was very, very successful. Now one day we raised $10,000.
$10,000.
Wow.
It was like America. She had a special person there giving us a blessing, but nobody ever thought we were going to beat
The oil company.
Goliath and
David and Goliath.
Goliath. It was kind of like that.
Yeah.
Nobody thought, oh, they're going to win. Come on, they're putting money, commercials. But the thing is, we had the people power. We went out, knocked on doors, educated the people, got the vote out. Not only once or twice did we go to each home. We went 3, 4 times until making sure that they went out and voted. I mean, there was actually
had the largest turnout of any county. That was off-year election, 2014.
So?
It was a gubernatorial election
For Measure J?
for Measure J, and we had the largest turnout of any county, 58 counties in the state of California.
That's exceptional.
And we really had the people motivated. They put TV commercials. They were putting commercials on Pandora, but we were knocking on doors. We were talking at the farmers markets,
organizations,
everywhere.
at the church.
Everywhere.
no, what I was impressed with was the old style of community organizing.
Yes.
You go to the house, and then you target the people there. You know, either they're registered or not. You follow through, get them listed down, put them to do absentee ballot.
Right.
But you sit there at the home discussing the the ballot itself, educating them. And the beauty of that is now they can speak to other people. Once you've gotten there, you're not going to lose them. They spent $6.2 million, and it's Exxon, Chevron, Shell, and Sturdy Oil were involved with that. Those were the four. We spent $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at $250,000, they spend 6.2 million. How were we able to do that? You know, because they were talking serious. You know, if we shut down the oil wells, schools are going to shut down, fire departments are going to shut down. They had people trying to fight a fire, and here comes the ambulance, all of a sudden disappears.
That's their
Like nobody showed up to fight the fire. You know, great commercials from that angle.
fear tactics.
But I tell you what, the fear that it put in people made people pay attention to it. And they said, huh? They looked at it again and said, my God, this is not good. They're going to do this and that. Who's doing this? Check it out again. And then we're at the door doing our thing, our way, and we're sweeping by. And our bottom line was the obvious. You start fracking around with the San Andreas fault. It's going to frack right back, you know? And that's the first thing. Yeah. What a shake, you know. San Andreas runs the entire length of the state. Mm. You start blowing up the rock that's holding it tight. We're asking, it's a Russian roulette just for profit. So that was easy. Countersell the other way, but they're the ones that put a pressure onto it that kind of opened up a can of worms, that they're really pro-profit, money, contamination, all that, when they could be achieving the same thing if they were to really be wanting to fix the problem. It's all about get it, squeeze the money, the profits, and walk away.
I want to make a point that builds on Juan's, actually 2 points, but that builds on Juan's final comment there about the different spirits that animate the two sides of the debate, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we're all tempted to be, I think, maybe cynical or perhaps just pessimistic about the possibility of our causes winning. When we look out there and there's always a response, there's always a conservative or reactionary response, and they seem to have their deep pockets that they look to, and they've got their intellectuals that they look to. It can be frustrating because we feel these things so deeply. We would like to see ourselves winning more often than we actually do, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to just make the point that there's a difference. And the campaigns that we did together really exhibit the way that love animates the work of progressive people and movements. And it's not just a kind of ethical or spiritual consideration, it's also a practical one. Like, without the trust that we all had for one another, the willingness to give of ourselves to one another, we never could have gotten this done. It's like, I remember sitting with Tomas, your son, who came up from the Ventura area with Food and Water Watch to run the Measure Z campaign. We took on the Salinas Valley. That's what we did. As Romero, we took on the Salinas Valley on behalf of his campaign. Mm-hmm. He needed help. I could see it in his eyes. He needed support. And it wasn't going to do him any good for me to show up and just see what I could get from him. The question is, what can I give? So, like, in the same way that we gave to Tomas, he gave to us. Mm-hmm. The Measure Z, he gave us all those names and contact for the entire campaign. Once it was complete, we needed to get community choice passed. He didn't hesitate. He just gave it. Yeah. Same with the bishop, Bishop Richard Garcia. He didn't ask, who are you and what? No, he read souls and decided these people have good intent, so I'm going to trust you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to open up our churches so you can come in and give speeches. I mean, how often does that happen? The Catholic Church just lets some random group come in and give a speech.
Mm-hmm. And then allow us to collect signatures outside with his blessing.
That's exactly right. We petitioned as well.
He was progressive, you know, he always was involved. Of course,
that's true, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's true, but he trusted. Yeah. The point that I'm making is that, you know, the kind of trust and the kind of love for one another that animates progressive movements when they're done correctly leads to a type of kind of traction and momentum that is really, you can't predict, and you can't emulate that from a conservative perspective because the tactics of fear and greed and the things that motivate the right, they don't bring people together. They don't have that solidaristic glue, you know, that we benefited from during this project. So to me, there was never a day of work. It was just a joyful, playful experience the whole time. And these guys, of course, were retired, so they didn't have to get paid.
Yeah,
But for Juan and me, we were actually, we were making a living, but it never felt like work. It was always felt like play. So that's a good model.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. Yeah. They didn't, after we put Juan with Measure J, they didn't think, people here said, you know, you think you won in Hollister, but you're not going to win here in Monterey.
Yeah.
They really didn't think
Well,
we had a chance.
Yeah, the oil company was embedded in San Ardo. They had a more of a presence here in Monterey County than we had in San Benito County. Say, you know, you're not going to do the same thing. Impossible. They sure spent a lot more money in Monterey than they did in San Benito. But, you know.
Isn't Monterey the 6th most oil producing
I
state?
think it's a
Or
fourth.
county in the
I
state?
thought it was
Number
fourth, yeah.
four?
I think it's a fourth. The first is Kern County,
Kern.
then Los Angeles County, believe it or not.
Okay.
Ventura County, then
And then Monterey.
Monterey County.
So it was high stakes. High stakes.
High stakes, yeah.
So I think after we won both measures, this is where Monterey Community Power came in.
Yeah.
I told Measure Z, we should get involved with them and help them out
Right.
because they helped us.
Right.
And also, that's what we want, you know, a bright future. We want clean energy. That's what we're fighting for. So they decided, okay, so we got the list of Measure Z people to help
Right.
with Monterey Bay Community Power, and that's how.
That's how we won. Never would have won without it.
No,
Never could have gotten
without
it
it.
done. Never would have gotten
No.
Phillips to come across the line like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, right, right.
But
One, do you want to say anything more, my friend, before we close out our discussion?
Well, I mean, I'm extremely proud to have the opportunity and that you guys all trusted me to freelance between the two efforts that were there. I got sucked into it, but thank you guys pulled me in. Margaret didn't let go, and it was such a delight to be around the kind of people that you were with them, in particular, because Chicanos are not really into the infrastructure, the issue about so much on energy and all that as we could be, should be. The state of California, in the Salinas Valley in particular, you look at it, 85% Latino, you know, and we're not at the table, you know, and that's sad.
Yeah.
And we need to do what we can, and the next generation, I think, is really going to put a real effort into it because they know it's life and death for them. They saw our efforts when we were their age, during the Vietnam Civil Rights era. All those folks that are now the activists say, I wish I was there during that time, I wish I was there, the music and everything, I wish I was there, you know. They're going to have their time and they're going to have to make those decisions, you know, about do I take the big money that they're putting on the table, like all of us have those opportunities offered, or do you do, you know, what you know is instinctively and morally and in the interest of the people that that we care so much about. And I think it's important that people have to wake up to that. It's no longer about the nickels and dimes, you know, it's about survival. You know, this whole planet's being jeopardized. We have depleting water aquifers, Salinas Valley. 5 ag companies showed up over here, and these guys are just sucking water out, running it through the plants a few times after they rinse, and supposedly they cleanse the water out, or they let it out in the Salinas River. If it's that good, why don't they put it in the slough? We have like a creek in the slough, and we can make a nice recreational area and have that water percolate back down to rejuvenate our water aquifer. But if we do not get involved with the electoral process, there's nobody at the table to even mention that.
Right.
You know, and that's what we got to wake up to that.
And I think you have the youth who are concerned about climate change. You know, that's.
You sure do. You sure do.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have to do it for our grandchildren. You know.
That's the last thing I'll mention is that Larry and Margaret talked about the odds that were stacked against really both the campaigns, but especially Measure Z in Monterey with the amount of money spent.
Right.
This is an example of one of what will be many grassroots, underfunded efforts to resist climate change.
Right.
Because history is an arc, and you guys were riding that wave. And so they had all the money and they had the institutional competence or whatever. What we had was the correct perspective on where humanity is going.
We had the truth. We had the
So
truth.
what are you doing now, Daniel?
I am immediately after the work we got done doing together. I shifted to the Lakota People's Law Project. So I spent half my time out of Standing Rock and other tribal nations. And in many ways, I'm doing the same kind of work that we did together. It's just community organizing. That's it.
Yeah.
Just as the people of the Salinas Valley are underserved and often neglected, you know, the tribal nations where I spend my time, the same way. You know, they're right near all these affluent communities, white communities, but they're just completely ignored most of the time. And the poverty is severe out there. But anyway, same stuff. Same stuff that we did.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was an honor working with you all. I love you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wes,
You
for
guys,
filming us.
let's do a fist thing over here.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, one.
Si se
Si se
puede.
puede.
Si se puede.
That was beautiful.
That was excellent. Yeah, that was wonderful.